Thanks to Thomas, Charlotte, Jonty and Hugo for supporting UX Podcast. We really appreciate it. You can support UX Podcast and the UX community too by visiting uxpodcast.com/support and making a contribution.
Hello, I'm Pan Axbo.
And I'm James Royal Lawson.
This is UX Podcast. We're in Stockholm, Sweden, and you're listening in 188 countries from Aruba to Spain.
I actually had to look up where Aruba was. Do you know where it is?
No, I don't.
No, I didn't either. Well, it used to be the Antilles, the Dutch Antilles, when it's Aruba.
Oh, okay.
It's a very north bit of South America.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, 100,000 people are there. Yeah. So today we have a link show.
Awesome. It's been a long time.
Has it been a long time?
It's been a little while. I always say that.
You always say that.
Yeah.
It could be a long time if you haven't listened to a link show for a while. And a link show, for those of you who are not aware of what that means, is where Per and I select a couple of articles that we've stumbled upon during the hours and hours and hours we spend reading articles every week. And,
true story.
Yeah. The two we have for you this week are Lean UX Canvas version 2 by Jeff Gothelf.
And the article number 2 is Encourage Direct Bookings Through a Positive User Experience by Jordin Wilson.
Lean UX Canvas version 2. 3 years ago, Jeff Gothelf, he presented his Lean UX Canvas. And, well, the Canvas is one of these handouts, worksheets that you can fill in to help you get your head around a particular subject, thing, whatever you're trying on.
Or print out really big and put up on the wall and use Post-its to brainstorm around the different topic
and there's been
areas.
quite a few canvases as tools over the years, from business model canvases and so on. Is it Lean Startup Canvas? There's several of these canvases to help you. But Jeff produced the Lean UX Canvas a few years ago, and he's now released an update to it. And this update is being based on not only feedback he's received, but also how it's been used and how Jeff has been using it during those 3 years. And
that's what I'm really excited when things go to version 2, because I like, for example, Dave Gray's empathy map. He released that last year, I think, as a version 2, and it's always so interesting to read about what did they decide to change and why, because that is hugely important to understanding what people misunderstand, what people think is really good, what type of help they need to understand. So there's some really good content here.
And I think it's also an important aspect of understanding that we work with something that's continuously in flux, continuously changing. So sitting back a bit, reflecting, and updating is a healthy and important aspect to these kind of tools. But we'll back up a little bit though. I think we'll go through some aspects of the canvas to help people understand what it is, because not everyone will be familiar with Jeff's canvas, even version 1. So in Jeff's blog post, one thing he does is he actually lists what it is or what it should be used for, to help increase the understanding of where it's applicable to be used. And he lists, I think, like 6 points.
Let me just first give a visual of the thing.
Oh, okay.
It's like a big rectangle. It has 8 boxes, and each of the box has a title or a question or a statement, and you're supposed to fill in each box. Go.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. And we'll get to the boxes shortly. So when you should use this, or suggest when it could be useful. It's a facilitation tool for cross-functional teams. It can help teams focus on why, not lose track of the why of what they're doing. It can be an aid during early stages of agile adoption. Jeff also suggests it can be an insurance policy for making sure that learning takes place in every sprint.
I like that.
According to how you're supposed to work in an agile sort of sprint methodology. He suggests also it can expose gaps in understanding between members of the teams or even between teams, and can be a first step in moving from outputs to outcomes. So rather than just producing stuff, you're actually focusing on creating an outcome. So it was nice to see that kind of, Jeff himself summarising how he envisages his tool being used and to be useful.
Yep, definitely.
You've already said about it. It's a canvas. It's a worksheet with 8 boxes, and each of the boxes contains an aspect that you should consider. Fill in, write something, put some sticky post-it notes somewhere. And what Jeff has done in version 2 is focus an awful lot on improving the instructions for each of the boxes, and clarifying some of the things that have shown to be a bit confusing for certain people, or haven't seen the differences maybe between 2 boxes, not fully understood the differences. So you've got boxes 1 and 3 are kind of now boxes. Do you have the sheet in front of you so you can see which 1 and 3 are there?
Number 1 is business problem. What problem does the business have that you're trying to solve? And box number 3 is users. What types of users, like personal of users, and types of customers? I think we'll get into that some more.
So then you've got 1 and 3, those 2 users here, and then you've got boxes 2 and 4 to the right hand side, which are
business outcomes and user outcomes and benefits.
Yeah, and sandwiched between these 2 sets of boxes is box number 5.
Box number 5 is solutions.
So box 1 and 3 is where you are now, box 2 and 4 is where you want to get to, and box 5 is what you're going to do to get across there. And underpinning the canvas at the bottom, you have boxes 6, 7 and 8.
And box 6, so we're moving now from left to right, box 6 is hypothesis. Box 7 is what's the most important thing we need to learn first. And box 8 is what's the least amount of work we need to do to learn the next most important thing?
So basically, these boxes at the bottom, 6, 7, and 8, these are the ones underpinning box 5, I guess, letting you understand and know whether your solution was the right thing. Or you could even, maybe arguably, boxes 6, 7, 8 underpin actually all the boxes to 1 to 5. Confirming your business problem, your target audience, your business outcomes, your benefits, and that the solution was right to gel it all together.
Yeah.
So that's Jeff's entire canvas.
It's really good how it's visual and how it's actually there's a lot of thinking about where things are placed in the canvas. I like that. What
I've always liked about the Linear X canvas is I think it is a good cross-functional tool to allow your team or teams to kind of take that moment to pause and reflect and actually properly think through what they're doing and understand what they're focusing on. As Jeff says and we've seen, it's far too often you get lost in the feature factory.
Yeah,
pushing out, just producing stuff. And you get further and further away from understanding the impacts or the benefits of what you're doing and how that actually benefits your business or organization.
Exactly.
There is something, though, which I think is still missing.
Yeah, me as well. And I mean, we've talked a bit about it.
I haven't even said about it yet. I haven't said which it is. No, we do actually have the same point. what the canvas could benefit from, and what teams could benefit from when discussing all of these 8 boxes, or perhaps an additional 2 boxes, or maybe an additional couple of moments of reflection within boxes 3 and 4.
Even more clarity around these boxes, maybe, just in the description of what you could talk about in those boxes. It's interesting because I highlighted some of Jeff's comments. I was trying to do an analysis of what did he learn himself, based on what I was saying before. What did you learn that made you change something? So actually, when it comes to box number 3, which is users, he had noticed that teams were taking a bit of a shortcut with this box. So he needed a simplification and clarification around that. And box number 4, which is where you want the users to be in the future, like the user outcomes and benefits, this was the part of the canvas with the most confusion. I thought that was interesting as well. So the 2 of the boxes that were causing the most problems with the canvas are the users and user outcomes. And what could that tell us maybe about how people work? I'm thinking, it's easy to fill in, this is the problem we're trying to solve, and this is what we want to get for the business. And these are the fun solutions we want to write out and think about how we could get to that outcome. But there's very little, and I think this is so common in most teams. There's too little focus on spending a lot of time getting the user boxes right, which means you have to actually go out and understand people.
Yeah, and this is also why I think we need to add, we need to go beyond the things you're focusing on and think about the things outside of that focus area.
Yes.
So, for example, box number 3, the users, there, and it's a good improvement that Jeff has pointed out that the users might be maybe someone who configures the system, or an administrator, or it doesn't have to be the person who buys your product and service. But here, it would be healthy to think about and list who is excluded from your product.
Yes, exactly.
Or what you're producing. Accidentally or deliberately, or, I mean, there's several ways people can be excluded. But here's your chance to actually put in concrete terms the people who really are going to be pushed away from this.
Yeah, and I think I actually wrote down the similar. I wrote non-users ? Because sometimes it's even helpful. Sure, we understand who the users are, but then maybe it's a way also of putting constraints on your solution. These are the non-users, because like you said, some of them will be excluded intentionally. And then you have, as is common, it's a go-to example, people with accessibility needs that you perhaps don't wish to exclude really, but that you probably will in the beginning, as most people argue, and you'll add something later. If you're not talking about that up front, chances are higher that you'll keep forgetting them. Exactly.
It becomes more of a conscious... You've lifted the decision to the surface and made it more conscious and more obvious that decision has been taken. Too often we take these decisions, I think, subconsciously.
Yeah,
it glides under. This, I think, comes to box 4 as well. When you've got outcomes and benefits, of course, I mean, you want to focus on the positive. You want to focus on the positive business outcomes and user benefits. But there will be things. There will be harm. There's potential for harm in almost everything we create.
Yep.
So here's your chance to actually think about that and maybe write down not just user outcomes or benefits, but potential harm.
Exactly. What could go wrong? What's the worst that could happen? That's always interesting to think about, because we always have indicators of, so how do we know this is a success? But we should probably also have indicators of, when is it a failure? How much needs to go wrong before we can actually decide not to do something, not to pursue it? It's interesting because this, I mean, of course, user outcomes and benefits is the parallel box or twin box to business outcomes. And business outcomes Jeff has put in examples of what you could put in there, like it's a 25% increase in customer retention or a 35% decrease in support calls. Very, very measurable things. Now, those things could happen. You could have a 35% decrease in support calls or increase in customer retention, and people could be worse off. I mean, those are outcomes that are really good for the business, but they could also mean that people are worse off. So box number 4 becomes this indicator where you probably have to be a bit more specific than I think that Jeff has given examples of, where you actually have to start talking about well-being. As a note, when I was going through this, I actually wrote, like, box 4 is the ethics box. Mm-hmm. This is where you have the opportunity to, like you were saying, map out what could go wrong, but also think about the indicators of what do I want for the users? How do I make sure that there's an indicator here that says not only is the business going in the right direction, the user or the people and humans are also going in the right direction when it comes to well-being.
I think what we're talking about here is, because I mean, I like the fact that in the canvas it goes from the left side with 1 and 3 to the right side with 2 and 4 via 5. So there's a symmetry there. There's a flow to the canvas. Whereas we're talking about boxes which underpin 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So they kind of sit down there as like almost as a reminder.
Exactly.
That yes, what you're doing is leading you from now to a future state, but there are things that happen when you go on that journey. We probably should do a UX podcast variation of Jeff's canvas. Maybe.
Oh, that would be cool. But to our point is also this information that we're talking about that you would add to this then is helpful when you get to the underpinnings of the canvas. And so when you're looking at what are the most important things we need to learn first, but when you actually decide what's the least amount of work to learn the next most important thing, you also are aware of who you are excluding when you are testing that. So you are made aware that we are doing the least amount of work to learn something here based on the fact that we are excluding certain types of users that we will not learn anything about potentially. Yeah. So you always need to, because yes, we learn stuff by doing a minimum viable product and so on, but that is often at the expense of a lot of people being excluded because you do things in a shorter time frame with less people and a less diverse set of people. Likely.
And you can also you can learn more quickly if you were right that it would potentially cause a certain amount of harm. There may be indicators that hypothesis in itself was correct, so you can actually prevent that harm from growing.
Right. And it's just striking me now when I'm looking at box 8, because the question is, what's the least amount of work to learn the next most important thing? You could also decide to switch that question around. So what's the next most important thing I want to learn with the least amount of work? So you decide the importance of it before you decide that the amount of work is the indicator.
It's a great tool, and as we've just shown, it creates conversations even if you don't fill it in. Yeah. We're in a conversation now about the empty boxes. So imagine the conversations you can get from your team if you actually do try and complete this.
Exactly, and remember also, well, it's a canvas. You use it in workshop formats. You use it in groups. I mean, it's not that Jeff has not added the things we just talked about. It's just that those may well come up in conversation in workshops when you're talking about it. These are the things that we think a lot of people miss.
Yep.
So this time around, when we're going to do the link show, we actually had a brief discussion about we need to find something positive, because there are a lot of articles out there on UX right now that are talking about this dystopian industry that we've contributed to and making people addicted to stuff. So I went on a hunt, and that's probably why the phrase positive user experience is part of this title.
Giving away what you searched for.
Probably, yes. So it's called Encourage Direct Bookings Through a Positive User Experience. And it's by Jordin Wilson. on the Blue Magnet Interactive blog.
Yeah, and I think they're an agency in America that focuses on the hospitality industry.
Right. And so what made me stick with this article, because I always obviously found a lot of articles, is that it made me feel good. It made me feel good about our work and what we strive for and what we can contribute to. And something that we always have been contributing to. And it's sometimes we need to remind ourselves and not forget that what we do is essentially positive. And the interesting thing about this, of course, also is that it's about e-commerce. It's about selling hotel rooms. But Jordin in this article at the offset talks about declining conversion rates, giving examples from Fast Booking and Invest, who have statistics around conversion rates dropping over time.
Yeah, the last 5 years, this chart shows conversion rates dropping from like 3.5% down to just over 2% in that 5 year period. And I'm not going to be dystopian, but I'm going to add a little star next to this, because these figures are talking about average website conversion rates globally. Yeah. As far as I can tell. I mean, I haven't dug really, really deeply in the stats, but when we're talking about global conversion rates, then they're going to mask a lot of variations between countries and a lot of variations between industries.
Right, and you're also not mentioning that you're increasing perhaps the number of visitors, so you're perhaps having the same number of sales or increasing number of sales, but the conversion rate, of course, is decreasing because of the number of visitors is increasing.
Yeah,
there's so many factors.
There's a lot of complexity to conversion rate and what is conversion rate and what data is used, what's the sample in all this. But there are other sources as well that that is showing that conversion rate maybe isn't by and large as what it once was for some industries anyway.
Right. Okay. The numbers guy has spoken. So. So, of course, when she started the article like this, I was sort of expecting you're talking about declining conversion rates. So what do people usually think? Okay, so we need to increase the conversion rate. And then people start talking about these techniques like the dark patterns, like the bait and switch, or confirm shaming, or scaremongering, or like making
scarcity
counters, saying there are people, 5 people looking at this room right now, or you have this much amount of time left to book to get this discount and stuff like that.
Only 2 rooms left.
Yes, but no. What she goes on to do is talk about simply making it better for people, and it's just so heartwarming because that's not what I expected. And that says something about expectations today in our industry about the types of articles that are written. How do we boost our profits and make shareholder value grow? No, this is all about the users and making them more comfortable with what they're seeing on the screen so that they are actually helped to book a hotel room.
Yeah. As an interesting aside, Barry, I read, or I saw a headline today that talked about how Ryanair as top yet again of the kind of blacklist of companies here in Sweden for the way that they conduct their business, to simplify that data. The number of it's data based on the number of complaints that the ombudsman here in Sweden has to deal with, and Ryanair is they take home that trophy every year.
That's crazy.
It's fascinating that they still survive. It's one of those mysterious things.
Yeah. It kind of goes to show how much a much cheaper price can make people choose something that they know may not even be of benefit to themselves,
and even go through a lot of bad patterns or dark patterns to reach that prize of something very cheap. But anyway, that was an aside.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Now back to Jordin. So she's writing, a site should be made with purpose and intent. And of course, that's a beautiful introduction. She goes on to talk about the booking button. Highlight the booking button by making the color pop or using a bold font so that potential guests can locate it immediately. It's a booking site for hotel rooms. make the booking button easy to find. Is what she's saying here essentially.
Oh, come on.
But it sounds silly in one way, but it's also a great reminder that you have actually sometimes you have to tell people this because they're so focused on other types of conversion rate optimization techniques. She talks about simplicity. Do not overwhelm guests with too many options. Excellent, because that's something that when I go to booking sites, actually, I'm overwhelmed with options because they're trying to sort of cause a cognitive overload, so it will be impossible for me to compare different alternatives. She actually mentions analysis paralysis. Yes, it's real. People have a hard time making decisions. So she's saying it may actually make people not book because and I think that's sort of what I hoped. I can, of course, not draw this conclusion because there's no way of saying why those conversion rates were dropping. But I'm kind of hoping in my heart that the conversion rates are dropping because people are tired of these techniques.
Well, yeah, I mean, from personal experience, you know that if you're faced with kind of unbundling and having to kind of rebundle it yourself while kind of going through this booking process, it's hard. I mean, if in some ways it falls back to that classic thing we talked about many years ago with you know, one of the best things you could do with forms is reduce the number of fields in your form. You simplify it by taking things away.
Right. To a certain extent.
I'm simplifying the advice there, but it ties in with that thinking.
And then she talks about mobile friendliness and making your website responsive because obviously it makes sense. And the thing is, I was looking. I read the article. Was looking back at it, and I thought that she maybe mentioned that Google was penalizing people who did not have mobile-friendly sites, but she did not write that. And I like that she did not write that because that is not the reason you should be making mobile-friendly websites.
No, it's not the main reason. No, exactly.
The reason you're making mobile-friendly websites is because people need them,
and that is why Google is penalizing. They're being the kind of like the bearer of bad news. They're going to saying to you, look, we're going to penalize you because you haven't already done the job of making this better for the actual users. Because we've noticed they do think it's better if your site is optimized for mobile.
Exactly. But Jordin is now not talking like a conversion rate optimizer. She's talking like she's someone who cares about the people, which again is what I really love. I'm so positive about this.
That was interesting. You just did a little thing there where you implied that conversion rate optimizers don't care about people.
No, that's of course not true. I'm going to sort of say that straight out. But at the same time, I have been struggling with. And of course, there are cliques in all different types of work and people that are writing that. Because the thing is, I've heard people say we don't need UX because we have conversion rate optimization. We can do A/B tests and we will learn what works just from the data. We don't need to talk to the people because the people, by clicking, will tell us what they want and need. And of course, I think most people have dropped that argument, but I lived with that argument for many years, and I was growing so tired of it. And for me, that was like when people said conversion rate optimization, that was what I was thinking in my head. But of course, I know a lot of people in CRO who actually do work with just making things better in the ways that Jordin's talking about in this article.
I mean, I deliberately took the chance to call you out on that little comment there, but
and that was good because then I was able to clarify.
Yeah, and we, I think we have felt and seen this, that there has been like a coming together of the marketing CRO UX worlds, and then there's been what I feel anyway, that we're drawing away from each other again. That I think maybe connected to what you say about there's a lot of tools, a lot of practices where CRO or marketing and sales don't feel they need the details that maybe UX provides, or the extra competence UX provides, or maybe even we try and slow down. Maybe that's part of it. That I think we've got an inbuilt in many of our processes. There is a tendency, a requirement for us to just slow down a little bit, resonate, think, collect data, look at what's happening, and come with a reasoned suggestion or design, whereas in many of these businesses, the conversion rate optimization is about getting quick results, finding out cheaply, quickly, is it that or that works? Is it that or that works? So we're constantly kind of like tweaking of it, and it's numbers, it's big numbers, and it's doing stuff quick and now.
And it doesn't measure well-being much.
And it doesn't tell you, a lot of these things don't tell you actually whether it's the right thing, whether it's what some people want. They maybe tell you what works better, but it doesn't necessarily tell you that is the right thing to be even
and it doesn't even give you the options of what to try next, really, because that's something that sort of comes out of people's imagination. Then if you're not talking to people and being out there and doing interviews and observational studies, you're actually not getting the hypothesis from other people, you're getting them from yourself. So perhaps if you talk to people, you could get more data on what types of things to try next.
But I love some of the quotes from the article. They made me smile as well. I think there was one there. You must lead potential guests to take action and book directly without being too pushy.
Yes.
Excellent. And then there's another one. Reveal your price sooner rather than later.
Yes, exactly.
No one likes to feel like they've been fooled. Be upfront with your price. So there was some wonderful kind of common sense. God, yeah, that is how I feel when I'm kind of tricked, conned. Realize that it wasn't the whole truth, and you don't like it.
Exactly. And my favorite, I think, is when she writes, "Listen to the wants and needs of your current and potential guests." She's talking about listening. She actually has the heading, "Less talking, more listening." I very rarely see people give this type of advice. But she's writing it under the heading of the FAQ page, that you're actually... The FAQ page is a help to people who rarely take the time to call you to ask questions, so that you make sure that you have answered the questions, the real questions that they tend to have. She has a great example. If a guest is arriving before check-in and they need to know if they can store the luggage with your hotel, they will likely want to find this information on your website and not have to call to ask. And when people have to call to ask, sometimes they go to another website. So this is just a way of realizing that if we are better at listening to the real questions that they usually have and understanding those, we can provide them a better experience online.
Yeah, we're being reassuring, and we're also aiding comparison, because if you need to know whether the hotel has parking, then that information has to be easily available for me, so that I can decide to exclude this hotel, or I can decide to go with it. It's not necessarily just price based. It's facilities and reassurance that this is going to work for me. Does it have a lift? Does it have wheelchair access? There's plenty of things which you really need to bake into it to give you that feeling that I'll go with this one.
Exactly. And it's so good because based on that introduction, conversion rates are decreasing. This could have been an entirely different article, something completely different, and we've seen those articles.
Yeah.
But this is one of the few times I've actually seen someone look at data and say, so we have to do better by users. It's not that we need to use tech to make people buy more. It's that we need to do better by our users.
Yeah, so these kind of articles, I think, we've read many of them over the years, where there'd be lists of behavioral economics tricks, or there'd be kind of tips about what kind of tests to run, what colours to try, what kind of tweaks to do to your landing pages, all those kind of hands-on in the sandpit kind of advice for making the needle budge, instead of taking that step back to thinking thinking about the person at the other side.
That's sort of what I want to end on here as well, is that when we start getting into these dystopian feelings and discussions around where our industry is heading and what we have contributed to, we need to remind ourselves that things like this make a huge difference for a lot of people. We make their lives easier. We make certain things that you do commonly in life easier to cope with. And that is what we contribute with. And of course, we should take on the challenges that we're discussing on a higher level as well these days. But remember that these are the things that we stand for. And I just think that there's something positive to take away and be thankful for.
Happy people are good business.
Yes.
If you want to share your conversion experiences or any other thoughts with us, then you can email us at hey@uxpodcast.com. And that works with the Swedish and American or English version of hey.
And if you want a suggestion of something to listen to next, try out episode 85, where we actually do talk about persuasion techniques back in 2014 with Bart Schultz.
And finally, if you'd like to contribute to funding UX Podcast, then visit uxpodcast.com/support.
Remember to keep moving.
See you on the other side.
What did the fish say when he swam into a wall?
I don't know. What did the fish say when it swam into a wall?
Damn!